My name is Elin Wade, and I used to believe that the worst kind of pain came with noise. Crying, yelling, slamming doors, drama, chaos. That's what I expected when I pictured heartbreak. Something loud, undeniable, something that left a mess you had to clean up with both hands and a towel soaked in regret. But that's not how it happened to me. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you don't notice until it's too late. And at start, I'd been staying at my mother's house that week. We all had family in every bedroom, cousins on couches, the air thick with perfume and last-minute arguments about seating charts. It was the night before the wedding. My wedding. The barn out back had been converted into the reception hall, string lights and all, and the old guest house on the far end of the property was where Mark and I had planned to stay the night after the... But that night, it was empty. Supposed to be anyway. It was past 11 when I realized I might have left the guest house unlocked. It was nothing, just one of those nagging thoughts that won't let go. I told Olivia I'd be back in 10. She was halfway through fixing the place cards and barely nodded. The sky was clear when I stepped out and the lights in the trees were still glowing. The barn had gone dark, but the path to the guest house was lit by solar lanterns. I remember the sound of gravel under my shoes. I remember the crickets soft and regular like a metronome in the background. What I don't remember is expecting anything. That's what made it worse. The guest house door opened when I tried it. Just swung inward like it had been waiting. The air inside was warm and smelled like old pine and dust. I stepped in slowly, already annoyed at myself for forgetting, already thinking about how tired I was. The light over the kitchenette was on, and that's when I saw them. Nora's dress, dark green, slid up one side, lay pooled on the floor like she'd stepped out of it mid-laugh. Mark's shirt was hanging off his shoulder, untucked, half open. They were on the couch, backs turned to me, limbs tangled like animals. Her hair was down loose and red against his skin. I don't remember gasping or crying. I remember how my eyes locked on Mark's hand, how it curved around her waist like it belonged there. How the room smelled faintly of something floral and cheap. Candle wax, maybe. Her perfume. I don't know. I stepped back, quietly. My shoes didn't even squeak. I pulled the door shut behind me and stood on the porch for a full minute before I moved again. I didn't feel anything at first. Not anger, not betrayal, just a kind of distance, like watching something through glass. Something happening to someone else. I walked back to the house. I didn't run. I didn't turn to look back. The air was cold on my arms. I remember passing the barn, seeing the reflection of the string lights in the puddle near the stairs. It looked like a sky trapped under glass. I sat in my car for almost 4 hours. Didn't turn it on. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring out at nothing. I thought about the vows we'd written together, about the gold lettering on the invites, about how Nora had insisted on being in charge of the playlist, had teased me for choosing too many sad songs. I thought about Ellie, too. My little sister who never made it past 6. I don't know why. Maybe because she was the only one who never lied to me. When the sun came up, I watched it crawl across the windshield, like it didn't know what it was shining on. At 6:30, Olivia knocked on my window. She was barefoot, her makeup half finished, still holding a lipstick in her hand. "Elin," she said softly. "You okay?" I opened the door and stepped out. My legs were stiff. My mouth tasted like cotton. I handed her my phone. "I'm not canceling," I said. She looked at me. "What, I'm not canceling the wedding," I repeated more clearly this time. "Elin, what I just need the morning," I said. "Just the morning. Don't tell anyone anything." I took my phone back and walked inside. My mother was already in the kitchen. I kissed her on the cheek. Said I didn't sleep well. She smiled, told me I'd feel better after breakfast. I told her I would. Then I went upstairs, closed the door behind me, and sat on the floor in my dress for an hour without moving. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at the veil hanging on the back of the chair and thought, this will mean something different now. That was the beginning. That was when I stopped being the kind of woman who waits to be rescued. That was the night I became the storm they didn't hear coming. There's a moment after a building falls, after the last beam cracks and the dust settles, where the world seems blank. Like it forgets how to make sound. That's what it felt like when I got ready the morning of my wedding. I moved through the house like a borrowed ghost. Everyone was buzzing. Olivia kept talking about how perfect the weather was. My mother fretted over last-minute details. My aunt spilled coffee and laughed too loudly. In the mirror, my face looked fine. Pale, but fine. The kind of face that no one would stop to study. That was the point. At 9:07 a.m., I texted Nora. "Don't come." She read it, never responded. Her icon vanished from our family group chat that afternoon. Nobody said anything. I told the hairstylist I didn't want anything too done. "Keep it soft," I said. "Loose." She smiled and said it would look romantic. That word stuck in my throat the rest of the day. I wore my grandmother's veil. Hand-stitched lace, heavy in places, a little yellow at the edge. She wore it in 1952. My mother wore it in 81. It smelled like cedar and old sugar. I pinned it myself, hands steady as stone. Mark didn't text that morning. No can't wait to see you. No love you. He was quiet too. Maybe he assumed I didn't know. Maybe he thought he was good at hiding things. Or maybe he was just that arrogant. The ceremony was at the church down the hill, a white clapboard structure with pews too small for the hips of modern guests. I stood behind the wooden doors and watched people take their seats. I saw Olivia lean in and whisper something to her boyfriend. I saw Mark laughing with the officiant. I didn't feel real. The doors opened, the music started, and I walked down the aisle toward the man who had ruined me with silence. His eyes were warm. He mouthed, "You look beautiful." I smiled, because I did. I looked like the kind of bride little girls dream of being. And that made the lie all the more precise. The vows were fast. He said mine like he meant them. I said his like they were a riddle I already knew the answer to. When we kissed, I thought about the back of Nora's neck. When we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I looked at the photographer and gave him a subtle nod. He clicked the shutter. I knew that would be the last photo of us together I would ever allow to exist. At the reception, I played the part, toasted, danced, ate one bite of cake. When guests asked where Nora was, I said she had the flu. Everyone accepted it, except Olivia. At the end of the night, she pulled me aside behind the barn. The candles were all out, the stars starting to press their way through the sky. "What happened?" she asked. I looked at her long and still. "I forgot to check the lock," I said. Her face changed. "Elin." She left her dress on the floor, I whispered. Green satin. I gave it to her last Christmas. "Oh my God." I didn't cry, I said. "Is that normal?" She took my hand. "No," she said, "but it makes sense." Then I leaned in and told her I was going to ruin both of them. Not in rage, not with fire or screaming or messy Facebook posts. I was going to do it my way, quietly, precisely. Not for justice, not even for revenge exactly. I just wanted the truth to cost them something, because it cost me everything. When we left the barn, the candles had burned down to pools of wax. The photographer was packing up. Mark was at the edge of the crowd, smiling for someone's Instagram. He looked at me and raised his glass. I smiled back and started building the plan in my mind. That night, in the guest house bed, he fell asleep, with his arm draped across me like nothing had happened. His breathing deepened. I stared at the ceiling fan and counted each slow turn. He didn't know I'd left the camera on. He didn't know the door was still unlocked. He didn't know that I was already gathering my silence like a blade. When I was 8, I learned how to disappear. It started in the kitchen during one of my mother's sharp afternoons. She was yelling about muddy boots Nora had tracked in a mess and blamed it on me. I didn't argue. I just stepped out of the way into the narrow pocket of quiet between the fridge and the wall and waited. She always calmed down eventually. Nora always got forgiven. It became a habit finding the hidden space, watching from the sides, being the one who took the hits that weren't meant for her but landed anyway. That's the kind of silence you carry. Not because you want to, but because you learn early it's safer there. I think that's why it took me so long to see Nora clearly. I didn't want to believe she was the storm. I wanted to believe she just got caught in one. But after the wedding, there was no pretending. Her note arrived the next morning. It wasn't even handwritten. Just a message on cream stationery folded neatly and slipped under my mother's front door like some kind of delivery. No envelope. 3 lines. I didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't supposed to happen. Please don't ruin everything. No name, no apology. Just those words spaced like facts. I stared at it for a long time. Memorized her handwriting, the sharpness of the R, the way she never dotted her IS. Please don't ruin everything. That was what stuck. She didn't say I'm sorry. She said don't ruin. Like I was the one holding the match. As if I hadn't already been burned to the bone. That's when I realized I'd always been the door they left open. The one they assumed would never slam. The one that creaked quietly and let everyone in no matter what they dragged behind them. But not anymore. Mark was oblivious. He walked into the kitchen shirtless that morning, made coffee kiss the top of my head like we hadn't both stepped through a lie the size of a church aisle. "You sleep okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. Just watched the way his hand curled around the mug, the same hand that had held her. He went outside to take a call. I took my phone into the guest room and opened a private browser, searched for a surveillance app, downloaded it. Then I emailed Olivia. Can you get me the footage from the barn's security cam and the guest house too, if it's working? 10 minutes later. You sure? Yeah. Okay, I'll send it before midnight. I sat on the floor and ran my fingers along the old cedar chest at the foot of the bed. It used to belong to my grandmother. She kept her best linens in it folded with lavender sachets. When I was little, she told me it held only the truth. That night, I opened it and laid my veil inside. I touched the lace where it had frayed, the yellowing edge, the thin spot above the brow where generations had worn it thin. It was the only honest thing I wore that day. I stayed silent that week, played the wife, smiled when people called, thanked them for their blessings. Every now and then, I caught Mark watching me like I was something strange, like he expected me to break. But I didn't. I packed up the dress, sent back the gifts, left the cake to rot in the fridge. Then I started digging. Nora was the easy part. She lived online. Her life was a mosaic of skincare routines and staged moments in golden lighting. Influencer. Ugh, I hated that word. All image, no substance. a performance for strangers. But I'd been her understudy since we were kids. I knew all her scripts. I started gathering the little cracks, screenshots, comments, brand names she wasn't supposed to tag, sponsorship codes she misused. Nothing scandalous, not yet, but enough to paint her as messy, untrustworthy. I wasn't going to destroy her. Not yet. I was going to give her the chance to do it herself. Mark was harder. He wasn't online much, but his LinkedIn was pristine. He worked for a design firm in the city, bragged about building brands that lasted. I wondered how his boss would feel about knowing he'd spent his wedding eve tangling with his sister-in-law on a couch in a guest house lit by a single bulb. I saved that thought, filed it under eventual. One night, I lay awake beside him and watched his chest rise and fall. I whispered, "What would you do if someone betrayed you?" He shifted slightly. "I'd get over it. People mess up." I watched the ceiling fan rotate 3 times before I said, "Some people don't." He didn't answer. Didn't even flinch. In that moment, I knew he still believed I didn't know. That was good. I needed time. I needed silence. And I needed to stop being the door they left open. I didn't cancel the wedding for a reason. Not because I still loved him. Not because I was in shock. Because I needed to see who he really was in daylight. Because I needed them both to believe they'd gotten away with it. And because I needed witnesses. The church had that old sugarwood smell like dust and lilies and polished lies. The same church where my mother married my father. Where Nora was baptized. Where I stood in white lace ring, trembling in my left hand, thinking about the security cam Olivia had pulled from the barn's back door. "Are you ready?" Olivia had asked just before we stepped into the nave. I looked down at my bouquet. White lilies. Nora's favorite. I hadn't chosen them. She had months ago when she insisted on helping. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." Mark looked beautiful. That was always the thing about him. He looked like someone you could trust. Broad shoulders, calm eyes, that slight lean forward when he smiled like he wanted to understand you. He didn't flinch when I walked toward him. I watched his hands. How still they were. No twitch. No nervous tremor. I watched the way he scanned the crowd, not searching, just checking. She wasn't there. Nora, not in the back, not in the pews, not by the door. The flu, my mother said. Stomach bug. Poor thing. Poor thing. Mark took my hands when I reached him. Whispered, "You look like something out of a dream." I smiled. "Good dream, or bad?" He laughed like it was a joke. The officiant began. I didn't hear half of it. My ears were filled with the sound of candles burning. There were 24 on the altar, all flickering gently. You could hear the wax ticking. Tiny cracks, like something breathing in reverse. When Mark said his vows, I looked him in the eyes and counted how long he held my gaze. 3 seconds. 4. He was practiced. A good actor. But not perfect. His voice caught once, just before, until death. He said it too fast, like he was afraid to taste it. When it was my turn, I took my time. I said his name slowly. Let the vowels stretch like silk pulled too tight. I paused before faithful. I watched Olivia. Her eyes were wet, but not with joy. The kiss was shallow, brief. No tongue, no tremble. He pulled away like we were already old. We walked back down the aisle, guests' smiling petals falling around us like snow that forgot to be cold. Someone whistled. My uncle shouted. Finally, everyone clapped. As if we weren't walking out of a lie we both agreed not to name. The reception was in the barn. White lights twisted around old beams. Tablecloths in soft blue. Name cards in cursive. A playlist Nora built. The songs kept repeating. The same 6 tracks. Olivia caught it first and yanked the phone. Deleted the playlist without a word. I stood near the head table and watched Mark laugh with his college friends. They toasted him to the luckiest bastard in the room. One of them poured whiskey down his throat like it was victory. I excused myself and went to the guest house. It was untouched. The couch was still there, the air still faintly floral. Her scent, their scene. I stood in the doorway and filmed the room. One slow, steady pan, the couch, the wine bottle on the floor, the bobby pin on the cushion. Her green satin dress was gone, but a button from Mark's shirt lay on the rug beneath the table. I picked it up, held it between my fingers, then dropped it into my palm and walked back out. I mailed the veil to Nora 2 days later, boxed it in tissue. The same veil I wore when I said I do. Only now I'd torn a small triangle from the lace near the hem, burned the edges gently with a match. The hole looked accidental, but it wasn't. I wanted her to know something was missing, something scorched. I included a flash drive. Just that. No label, no note. Inside it, 3 files. One from the barn, one from the guest house, and one from my phone. Footage of her back, her laugh, her arm sliding around Mark's neck, soundless but not empty. Candles flickered in the background. I could see them clearly. Candles don't lie. Not like people do. That night, I watched her Instagram disappear. No posts, no stories, no tagged photos. Just gone. She didn't call me. She didn't need to. I already knew what she'd say, and I didn't care. I mailed the box on a Tuesday. No return address, just her name written in my handwriting, neat, deliberate, like when we used to label our textbooks side by side at the kitchen table. It arrived Friday morning. I knew because she texted Olivia. Not me. Olivia sent me a screenshot. No words, just the image. Nora's message time-stamped 8:46 a.m. What is this? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By then, the quiet was working. You don't have to scream when the floor starts giving out beneath someone. Nora's entire life was built on fabric. Satin filters, curated angles, a controlled brand, with just enough mess to seem relatable. That veil, torn and burned, wasn't just symbolic. It was disruption, the kind you can't airbrush. I knew what would come next. A story, a performance. She couldn't help herself. She went live that night. Soft lighting, barefaced, a mug of tea, all the signs of vulnerability. Her voice was raw, or performed to sound raw. She started with, I wasn't going to say anything, but, and then she spun. She talked about heartbreak, people you think you know. She said she made mistakes, that she was processing a lot, that she wasn't going to speak badly of anyone, that she loved her sister deeply. I watched it in my dark living room with the sound low. Candle burning beside me, same scent as the one from the guest house, a cheap peony knockoff that used to remind me of spring. Now it smelled like evidence. Mark wasn't in the video, of course. She didn't say his name. Just someone I trusted. But it didn't matter. The internet filled in the blanks fast. We were a small town, and she'd already posted so much before photos of the barn of Mark and me laughing at the rehearsal dinner. She forgot how easily her own archive could betray her. The comments turned. Some believed her, said she was brave for being honest. Others asked hard questions. Why weren't you at the wedding? Didn't you pick out the venue? Didn't you say he was like a brother? And then someone posted a blurry screen grab from the guest house footage. It wasn't me. I hadn't leaked it, but it spread fast. Nora deleted the live video within the hour. Too late. A popular gossip account picked it up, used words like inappropriate and unforgivable. One of her skincare sponsors pulled out the next day. I wasn't celebrating. Not really. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I'd just taken off someone else's coat after wearing it too long. Mark noticed the shift. That weekend we had dinner with his parents. He smiled too much. touched my arm in public like we were on a second date. I could see the tension in his jaw when he glanced at his phone. He didn't bring up Nora once. I did. She seemed stressed, I said between bites of mashed potatoes. He paused, fork hovering midair. What do you mean I watched her live? The one she deleted? He blinked. You saw that everyone did. He didn't say anything. Later that night in the car, he asked, "Are you okay?" I looked out the window. Why wouldn't I be? He turned down the heat. You've just been different. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to peel back my skin and say this is what different looks like when the inside starts refusing to play dead. Instead, I said, we're newlyweds. Maybe this is me happy. That shut him up. He kissed my neck before we went to bed. I let him. Not because I wanted to. Because I was curious. I wanted to know how much of himself he could fake. How deep the performance ran. He smelled like expensive soap. His skin was warm, but it felt like brushing against an empty coat. The next morning, I boxed up the rest of our wedding gifts. All the monogrammed towels, the custom cutting boards, the Mr. and Mrs. mugs. I stacked them in the garage, sealed each box with a thick strip of silence. I also called a lawyer. The annulment would be easy. No assets shared, no children, just paperwork and time. Time was the one thing I had in abundance now. When I walked into the kitchen later, Mark was scrolling through his phone, unreadable. He looked up when I entered. Did you see the comments, he asked? On what Nora's account? It's getting ugly. I opened the fridge, took out cream for my coffee. She'll survive. She's not built for this kind of backlash. I turned, leaned against the counter. Neither was I. He flinched, just a little, a flicker across his face, a recognition. He opened his mouth like he was going to speak, but didn't. Instead, he picked up his coat, said something about meetings, and left. The door closed gently. No slam, no storm, just absence. And in that quiet, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Revenge doesn't come with a trumpet. It comes with a flicker, a pause, a question someone didn't mean to ask out loud, and then the sound of something beginning to burn. Nora posted again. Not a video this time, just a single photo. Her standing near a window, one hand on her hip, the other, shading her eyes like she was lost in thought. The caption read, "Growth is ugly sometimes, but I won't be ashamed of mine." She tagged 3 mental health accounts and turned off comments. I stared at the photo for a long time. The light behind her was golden perfect. Probably filtered, maybe even staged. She didn't look ashamed. She looked like someone auditioning for forgiveness. And maybe she'd get it. Maybe the world would decide she'd suffered enough. That public contrition was enough to cancel the sin. But that wasn't why I kept watching. I wasn't hoping she'd fall. I was watching to make sure I didn't start wanting her to. Mark was still trying to play normal. He cooked dinner twice that week. Left little notes on the fridge thinking of you in blue pen. He even brought home flowers. Lilies of all things. I didn't say anything about it. I just watched them slowly wilt in their vase petals, folding in like hands, praying for something they didn't deserve. The annulment papers were nearly ready. Olivia helped me find the lawyer. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. When I handed her the manila envelope with our wedding license, she just pressed her lips together and nodded. You know, she said as she slid the documents into her bag. You're handling this with more grace than I would. I'm not aiming for grace, I said. Then what precision? She didn't smile, but I saw something shift in her face. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was worry. Doesn't matter. I'd stopped needing to be understood. That night, I logged into an account I hadn't touched in years. My old art portfolio. Back when I still taught high school before everything. I scrolled through sketches I barely remembered making. One of Nora at age 15. Pencil on cheap paper. Sharp edges, no color. I'd drawn her with a snake in her hand coiled around her wrist. Funny how some part of me already knew. I uploaded 3 new pieces. No explanation, no signature, abstract, cold. And then I posted one thing on my own social feed. Just one. A cropped photo, black and white. A veil on the floor, no faces, no caption. It took less than an hour for people to connect the dots. And then, the fire started. Whispers, threads, DMs from strangers asking if I was okay. A girl from high school messaged me out of nowhere. I saw what Nora did. You deserved better. I didn't reply. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want a chorus. I wanted consequences. Mark's firm held its quarterly client summit the next week. He left early that morning. Suit-press shoes shined, every inch of him manicured to match the man they thought he was. What he didn't know was that I'd emailed a folder of screenshots to his supervisor the night before. Anonymous, of course, a subject line that read, FYI Mark Harrow's extracurriculars. The folder included texts, photos, the time-stamped footage from the guest house. Not a word from them, not yet, but I knew the silence meant something was happening. 3 days later, Mark came home late. Not drunk, not angry, just stunned. He didn't take off his coat. Did you send them something, he asked, voice flat. I closed my book, looked up slowly. Send who? My firm. Don't play dumb, Elin. He'd never used that tone with me before. Like I was beneath him, like he was wounded. It made my blood go still. What did they say? I asked. They're reviewing. Said I should take the week off. Said this could jeopardize clients. He walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water with trembling hands. His reflection in the glass cabinet looked smaller, not weak, just less important. This is because of Nora, he said. I told you it didn't mean anything. But it did, I said. To me. He set the glass down too hard. It cracked. Water spilled in a slow, lazy circle. Elin, this is your life too. My income, our stability. I stood, walked to the counter, looked him in the eye. It's not our anything anymore. You just haven't signed the papers yet. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For once, Mark didn't know what to say. There was no script, no charm, just the slow realization that the ground was crumbling. I left the room without another word. That was the first fire. Not the social media kind, not the gossip kind. The kind that burns quietly from the inside out. The kind that doesn't need flames to destroy a structure. The next morning, he was gone. Suitcase missing, keys gone. No note, only a mug in the sink and the smell of lilies going rotten. Mark tried calling 5 times the next day. I let it ring each time, the sound, a dull vibration on the kitchen counter, as I sliced through an apple with a paring knife too sharp for its task. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I waited until the house was dark and the candle on the windowsill had burned down low wax curling, like a lip drawn tight over teeth. That scent, again peony, and something too sweet a smell that had started to rot inside my memory. I sat on the floor with my phone face down and played his messages in order. One by one, the first was calm. He used words like misunderstanding, confusion repair. The second tighter. I think you're overreacting, Elin. This is marriage. People mess up. You're being cruel. The third one was almost quiet enough to pass as vulnerable. I didn't know how to tell you. Nora came on to me. I was drunk. You know how she is. The fourth, a voice shaking, not with sadness, but with fury. This won't just ruin me. You'll look bitter. You'll lose people. Be careful, Elin. And the fifth, just breathing. Heavy, uneven. Then a single word, please. I saved them all. Then I forwarded every single one to Olivia with the subject line insurance. She replied within minutes. I've got you. There's something strange that happens when someone tries to make you feel crazy. Not loud gaslighting, not screaming denials, but the subtle kind. The kind where a man sits across from you and talks about love while your memory of his hand on your sister's thigh is still burning the back of your eyes. The kind where you start to question whether you've made too much of something that already gutted you. But that's the thing about pain, it doesn't need permission to be real. Mark's boss responded 3 days after I sent the files, a curt email to my anonymous address. No greeting, no closing. Just this thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll take it from here. Mark didn't show up at the office again. Olivia told me his LinkedIn was under revision. I laughed out loud when I heard that. Under revision. What a perfect phrase for a man whose entire life was a draft of a better version of himself. That same week, I visited Nora's profile again. Not because I wanted to. I told myself it was research. Inventory. But the truth was, I needed to see the cracks. Her most recent post was gone. So were the last 5. No new stories, no ads, no videos of her walking barefoot through perfectly styled kitchens. I checked her engagement rate. Down 62%. I checked her tagged photos. Someone had reposted the veil, the one I'd mailed her torn and burned, and added a caption about toxic sisterhoods and influencer hypocrisy. I didn't comment. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. It was already working. Still, part of me wanted to hear her voice. Not the performance. The real one. The one from childhood when we used to whisper across the hallway about monsters we thought lived under our beds. The real monster had been in the room with us all along. I knew she'd reach out eventually. I just didn't expect it to be at night. It was 1:13 a.m. when my phone buzzed. No contact name, just a number I hadn't blocked. Not yet. I answered without a word. Silence. Then her voice raw high in the throat. Why are you doing this to me? It wasn't anger. It was confusion. Genuine bewildered confusion, as if she truly believed she was the one being wronged. I said nothing. Elin, she said again. This was between us, not the whole world. No, I said finally. This was never between us. It was inside me. You just lit the match. She started to cry, loud gulping sobs. I listened. You don't know what I've lost. I looked around my dark house, at the burnt wick, the dead flowers, the boxes in the hall. Yes, I said. I do. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. Then disappear. I hung up before she could answer, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The next morning, I brewed coffee and stood at the kitchen window. The late summer sun was crawling across the porch rail, touching the edge of the candle's glass jar. The wax had cooled into a cracked skin, hard, silent. I poured my coffee and thought of Mark's last voicemail, thought of Nora's sobs on the phone, thought of how many years I'd spent being the steady one, the kind one, the patient one. There's a smile women learn when they want to be liked. It's soft, polite, curved at the edges with nothing inside it. I'd worn that smile for most of my life. I wasn't wearing it anymore. She asked me to dinner in a message so carefully worded it made my skin itch. Just the two of us. I want to talk. Clear the air. I miss my sister. I read it twice. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit there in my inbox like a live wire humming softly. Olivia warned me not to go. She's not sorry, Elin. She just wants to rewrite the ending. I know, I said. That's why I'm going. We met at a restaurant she used to rave about, one of those dimly lit places that serves scallops the size of nickels and calls it elegance. She reserved a table near the window in full view of the street, a camera-friendly seat. I knew exactly what she was doing. She stood when I walked in, arms out like we were greeting after a long trip apart. I didn't hug her. I slid into the booth, ordered water, and waited. She looked thinner, pale even under the soft lighting. Her nails were chipped, her mascara uneven. For a moment, I almost believed it, this version of her that looked fragile, undone. Then she smiled, and I saw it again, that familiar glint. The one she wore when we were kids, and she'd broken something that wasn't hers. "I've been thinking about you so much," she said, "about how fast everything got out of control." I didn't answer. "I know I messed up, and I'm not saying what I did was okay. I just—" She trailed off, watching my face like it held a clue. "I lost myself." "No," I said. "You found yourself. You just didn't like who it was." The smile wavered. She picked up her menu, tried to laugh. "God, Elin, you've always had a way with words. Even when we were little. I used to sneak into your room and read your diary, remember I do? You used to write poems about ghosts and locked doors. So dramatic." I looked her in the eye. "Maybe I saw things you didn't." She blinked. "Set the menu down." "Look, I didn't come here to fight." "Then why did you come?" "I want to fix things." "No, you want to control the narrative?" The waiter came by. She ordered a salad. I asked for nothing. She tried to steer the conversation back toward neutral ground. Childhood memories. Our dad's terrible grilling. The summer she broke her collarbone falling out of the tree behind the barn. I let her talk. Let her remember us as girls. Let her lie. Then I opened my purse and slid a small envelope across the table. She didn't touch it. "What's this? My receipt?" I said. "For what? Private investigator," I said. "Retainer paid in full." Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't." "I did." Why? I took a sip of water. "Because I needed to know if it was just Mark." A long pause. "What did you find?" I didn't answer. "Elin," she said, her voice lower now, not sad, dangerous. "That's a violation. You violated me first." She leaned in. "You really want to destroy me?" I smiled. Not cruelly, not triumphantly. Just calmly. "No, I want you to tell the truth, and I want you to live with what it costs." She sat back, her fingers tightening around her glass. "I'll deny everything," she said quietly. "If you go public with whatever you think you have, I'll call it fake. You think people trust anonymous tips? I have fans." I stood up slowly. "I don't need fans," I said. "I have facts." I left her there in her spotlight seat, framed in candlelight and silence. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for almost an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there watching the porch light cast long shadows on the steps. Then I went inside, locked the door behind me, and opened the folder the investigator had sent. Mark hadn't just cheated with Nora. There were others. 2 women, one from his office, one from a client's team. Both stories, almost identical meetings that turned into drinks that turned into something worse. He never used his real name, never stayed the night. One of them had even blocked him after he wouldn't stop messaging her. I scrolled through the screenshots, the receipts, each one like a match struck in a dark hallway. I wasn't surprised, but I was done. Nora had been the last betrayal that still carried a trace of childhood in it. Now even that was burned through. I backed the files up in 3 places, labeled the folder property. Then I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks across the plaster, remembering a moment from when I was 12. Nora and I in the attic, her trying on my clothes, laughing, spinning. She knocked over a box. a framed picture shattered. I bent to pick it up. She ran downstairs before I could even speak. When my mom asked who broke it, I said, "I didn't know." That was the first time I took the blame. I've been sweeping up glass ever since. There's a strange kind of power in holding the truth when no one knows you have it. It's not loud. It doesn't thrum in your chest or race through your blood like adrenaline. It settles. Heavy and slow. Like a stone, warmed by sun, hidden in your coat pocket. Not meant to hurt anyone, but capable of breaking glass if thrown hard enough. The file folder on my desktop stayed unopened for 3 days. I told myself I didn't need to look at it again. That knowing was enough. That the proof, the messages, the hotel invoices, the brief but sharp emails between Mark and a woman named Caitlin was just a formality. The truth already lived in me, had already moved in and rearranged the furniture. But on the third night, I opened it anyway, and I read everything. Caitlin was detailed, clear. Her emails were clipped but precise. She mentioned how Mark had misrepresented himself, that he'd pressured her for a second night, that he sent a photo the next morning of her bare back. She didn't answer, blocked his number. The other woman, Denise, had filed a complaint through her company. It didn't go anywhere. HR called it inconclusive. Mark left the client contract a few weeks later. Neither of them knew about me, that I was the wife, that there had even been a wedding. I closed the folder and sat very still in the dark. No music, no candle this time, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the old floorboards beneath my bare feet. I thought of Nora, and how she'd looked across that restaurant table, all sharp cheekbones and stretched sincerity. "You really want to destroy me?" she'd asked. No, that was the thing. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted the full picture, all the pieces, because if you don't see the full wound, you can't trace the scar. And mine had gotten deep. When I was 16, I fell on ice outside the school gym, landed hard on my elbow. The bone didn't break, but the skin split deep enough to see the white beneath. The nurse cleaned it with salt water. It stung like fire. I bit my lip until it bled. She said, "That's good. It means you're healing." But she was wrong. Healing doesn't mean pain. It means restructuring. The body makes do with what's left. I started seeing my own pain that way now, as something I could rebuild from. The next day, I printed the screenshots. Not for court, not for social media, for myself. I kept them in a file folder with no label, just tucked it in the cedar chest beneath the veil. That chest had always held my grandmother's linens. Now it held something else, truths folded tightly into place. I cleaned the house after that, top to bottom. Not like a woman trying to distract herself, like a woman getting ready. The scent of old wood and bleach filled the kitchen. I replaced the flowers with nothing, just an empty vase, clean and clear. That night, Olivia stopped by. She stood in the doorway for a long second before saying anything. "You look different," she said. "I feel different." She set her bag down and leaned against the counter. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm solid." She nodded slowly. "You sure you don't want to go public? Say something people would back you." "I don't need a crowd." "What do you need?" "I need them to feel what I felt. And do they? I think they're starting to." We stood in silence for a minute, both watching the dim reflection of the porch light in the window. The world outside looked still, like winter was coming early, and everything had agreed to hold its breath. Olivia reached into her bag and pulled out something small. A silver pendant, worn simple, a locket. "I found this in the barn," she said. "Near the sound booth? Thought you'd want it." I opened it. Inside was a tiny photo. The three of us, me, Nora, and Ellie. I was 10, Nora 7, Ellie 5. We were sitting on the swing Mark eventually proposed on legs tangled laughing. Not posing, just laughing. My fingers trembled. It wasn't nostalgia. It was gravity. "Thank you," I whispered. Olivia touched my arm, then left without another word. I stayed in the kitchen long after the door closed, staring at that locket. Not because it made me sad, because it reminded me that once before all this there had been something untouched between us. But that was gone now. Some scars can't be smoothed over. They shouldn't be. Because they remind you where not to walk barefoot. I put the locket in the cedar chest, closed the lid, and for the first time since the night I forgot to check the lock, I felt safe. It didn't happen all at once. Nora's fall. It came in soft cracks, slow and irregular, like a branch splintering under weight you can't see yet. You only notice it when the silence underneath changes shape. First, her sponsorships stopped reposting her content. Quietly. No statements, no drama. Just gaps. Then someone on a beauty subreddit uploaded a compilation of her deleted posts, screenshots, archived videos, caption changes. There was no smoking gun, but there didn't need to be. The pattern told its own story. Words like manipulative and calculated started to appear. People began referencing the veil incident. The story twisted into urban myth. No one had the full picture, but everyone had a piece. The photo of her and Mark resurfaced, one from the rehearsal dinner. She'd cropped me out. Left his hand on her waist in frame. A girl commented it was always her plan. Look at her eyes. That comment got over 6,000 likes. I didn't post. I didn't reply. I just watched. People underestimate what watching can do. They think silence means absence, that you're not there. But silence, real silence, is observation without permission. Mark, on the other hand, tried to stay visible. He posted a photo of himself hiking, captioned "Rebuilding," staying grounded, owning my truth. It had 9 likes. He emailed me the same night, a single sentence. "You won't be able to hold on to this forever." He was right. I didn't want to. Truth isn't something to possess. It's something you release like heat from your own body. Let it rise. Let it rise until it's no longer part of you. That's what happened the day Nora called me again. I was walking through the farmer's market downtown, the last few peaches of the season soft in my hands. She sounded breathless, panicked. "Elin, they're digging up stuff. Old messages. Some guy I dated in college just posted screenshots. It's all twisted." I stepped away from the crowd. "Why are you calling me because you started this?" "No," I said. "You did." She went quiet, and then she asked the one question I didn't expect. "Do you think I'm evil? I let that hang for a beat too long?" Then I said, "I think you're so used to being forgiven, you never learned how to be sorry." She said my name once more. Just once. Quiet, almost childlike. And then she hung up. I stood there in the sun, holding a bruised peach in one hand and my phone in the other, and realized something I hadn't before. She was never going to undo what she did. She didn't know how. Maybe she never would. But that wasn't my job anymore. That night, I played the old voicemails again. Mark's voice, Nora's silence, the missing breath between their excuses. I recorded one more file. Not for them. For me. I sat in the guest house. Same couch. Same lamp. Same quiet. I pressed record and spoke. "I saw you, both of you." I didn't scream because screaming felt too small for what you took. I didn't break anything because I knew you'd expect that. Instead, I watched. I waited. And I built something stronger than noise. I saved the file, titled it Evidence of Self. Then I backed it up 3 times. Not because I thought I'd forget, but because memory, like scar tissue, needs to be tended. A week later, someone messaged me, a girl from Nora's followers. Said she used to admire her, even wanted to be her. But now she just felt confused. She ended the message with, "I don't know what the truth is anymore." I didn't respond. But I wrote something in my notebook later that night. Sometimes the truth doesn't look like justice. It just looks like survival. I closed the book and listened to the sound of something quiet. Not breaking. Not anymore. Just settling into its final shape. I drove to the lake house on a Thursday morning early enough that the mist still clung to the road like breath on glass. It had been almost a year since I was there last. Since Mark's proposal. The ring had been hidden under a napkin next to a slice of cherry pie I never touched. Nora had been the one who suggested the weekend trip. "You two need a getaway," she'd said, eyes wide with generosity. Now I wonder if she knew even then if she was already testing how far she could reach into what was mine. The gravel cracked under my tires as I pulled into the drive. The dock was still crooked. The canoe still flipped upside down beside the fire pit. Nothing had moved, and yet everything had changed. I took off my shoes and walked barefoot across the weathered planks. The lake was calm. Too calm. Its stillness made the trees look suspended like someone had painted them and forgotten to finish the edges. I sat at the edge and let my feet dangle into the cold. And for a while, I just listened. Not for birds, not for wind, not for anything dramatic. I listened for what I'd missed. There was something about water that made things clearer. Not in the visual sense, but in the way it held everything without judgment. My words, my silences, my anger, my restraint. All of it echoed back softer. I reached into my bag and pulled out the list. It wasn't digital. I'd written it by hand in a composition notebook back when the pain had sharp corners. There were bullet points. Mark's betrayals, Nora's lies, exact dates, deleted texts I had screenshotted and printed. I'd color-coded them at one point as if that might make the damage easier to read. I flipped through it one last time. Page after page of proof. Names, times. The sick kind of documentation that comes from trying to make pain orderly. Then I closed the cover and held it over the water. I didn't throw it. Not like in a movie. Not in some sweeping arc meant to dramatize healing. I let it go. Quietly. Let the notebook slip from my fingers and land with the softest sound. A hush. The pages opened mid-sync, fluttered like wings, and then were gone. It didn't feel like letting go. It felt like letting down, like finally placing something heavy back into the earth where it belonged. I stayed until sunset. Watched the sky shift from gold to bruised blue. The water turned darker, took on the colors of everything around it. When I stood, my legs were stiff, my hands cold. But I wasn't the same. That night back home, I didn't look at the cameras. I didn't check Nora's page. I didn't open Mark's voicemails. I lit a candle and placed it on the kitchen counter. The same brand, same scent. I watched the wax pool and flicker and held my breath until I didn't need to anymore. And then I let it out. It wasn't dramatic. That was the strangest part. No warning, no call ahead, just her standing at the edge of the gallery like she'd wandered in from some colder place, her coat still wet at the shoulders from the rain. The exhibit had been open for 20 minutes. It was my first solo show since before the wedding, before all of it. I hadn't even wanted to call it a comeback, though some people did. I'd titled it Under Glass, quiet, simple. Each piece hung deliberately surrounded by white space and clean light. Charcoal ink wax resist, no captions, no colors. People moved slowly between the frames, whispering politely. Someone touched my elbow and said they saw such strength in the lines. I nodded, but didn't really hear. Then I saw her. Nora, not dolled up, not glowing. No heels, Her hair was pulled back with no volume. Her lipstick looked smudged, like she'd put it on with the car mirror. She wore a coat too big for her frame, the collar folded wrong. She didn't look destroyed, just faded, like a photo left too long in a windowsill. She didn't speak. She didn't approach. She just stood there staring at one particular drawing. It was the only piece I hadn't originally planned to show. A pencil sketch. 3 girls in white dresses on the old swing behind my mother's house. No faces. Just the curve of limbs, the hint of wind in a hem, the rope cutting through shadow. The smallest one, Ellie, drawn mid-laugh, her feet not quite touching the ground. I don't know how long Nora stood there. 5 minutes, 10. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves, her mouth slightly open. She didn't cry. When she finally turned to go, she passed me without looking. Her eyes stayed down. She walked to the back wall, leaned forward, and tucked something behind the corner of a frame. Then she left. Not a glance. Not a sound. Just the click of the door as it closed behind her. I waited until the gallery emptied out. Then I went to the wall. Reached behind the frame. It was a photograph. Old, slightly curled, a print from the 90s color starting to bleed at the edges. Me, Nora, and Ellie. Sitting on a curb outside the general store, popsicles in hand, all 3 of us grinning like we had the whole world still ahead of us. I recognized the moment immediately. My mom had taken it. I'd scraped my knee earlier that day. Nora had given me her cherry popsicle to make me stop crying. I hadn't seen that photo in 20 years. I didn't feel moved. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt steady. I slid the photo into my coat pocket and turned off the lights. The gallery darkened slowly, one track at a time, until only the piece of the swing remained lit. Just that quiet, faceless sketch holding the room. Outside, the street was wet. The kind of cold that clung low settled into your sleeves and hair. I walked home slowly, the photograph warm in my palm. At home, I stood in front of the cedar chest, opened it, inside the veil, the folder, the locket. I added the photo, not because I forgave her, because it happened, all of it, because people want to rewrite things, blur the parts that hurt, make themselves the center again. But I wasn't going to let her do that. Not with me. Not ever again. People assume the end of something is a moment, a crash, a door slammed, a paper signed. But the truth is, endings rarely announce themselves. They leak, fade, recede, until one day you realize you've been standing outside the wreckage longer than you ever stood inside it. I moved back into my mother's house that fall. Temporarily, I told myself. But the truth is, I liked the creak of old floors again. The chipped paint on the banister. The way the light hit the back porch around 4 o'clock, soft and golden, like it was apologizing for something it never said. I painted the porch over Thanksgiving weekend. 2 coats, eggshell white. I left the old welcome mat, though it had our family name stitched in fading thread. Wade. I ran my hand over it one morning and felt something small and solid settle back into my chest. I went by Elin Wade again. Just that. No hyphen. No husband's name trailing behind like a leash. I signed it on a new lease, on my first post-show commission. On the back of a canvas I hung in a local cafe. Full quiet letters. My own name. My real one. Mark tried to call once more. Late November. I didn't pick up. The voicemail was short. I lost everything. I hope it was worth it. I deleted it without listening again. Nora hadn't contacted me since the gallery. But I heard things. That she'd moved. That her brand was on hiatus. That she was planning a rebrand. New name. New tone. Something more authentic. I didn't follow the account. Authenticity isn't a new color scheme. It's earned. Sometimes I still see them both in my dreams. Not together, not kissing. Just shadows at the edge of things behind a fence in the corner of a hallway, standing by the guest house door. But when I wake, I don't feel hunted anymore. I don't feel owed anything. I make coffee in the quiet, and I choose how I spend my mornings. Some scars are soft. Not the kind people can see, but the kind that hum just beneath your skin when the world gets too loud. I carry them now, not with shame, not with anger. Just recognition. The veil stays in the cedar chest. I haven't opened it in months. I don't need to. I don't wear white anymore. I wear slate, charcoal deep green, earth tones that don't beg to be kept clean. I light candles still sometimes. Different scent now, fig and smoke. I let them burn to the base, let the wax pool and harden again. There's no ring on my finger. But I wear a necklace now. The locket Olivia gave back to me. Inside it, the photo of the three of us. Sometimes I think about removing Nora from the picture, cropping her out, letting Ellie and I stay suspended in that younger moment alone. But I won't, because pretending something didn't happen is just another kind of lie. And I'm done with lies. People say revenge changes you. They're right. It doesn't make you colder. It makes you clearer, more aware of the weight of your own name, of the space you take up in a room, of how easy it is to let people live inside you until they start to rearrange the furniture. I keep the doors locked now, not because I'm scared, because I finally know what it means to be alone without being empty. My name is Elin Wade, not the wife, not the sister of, just me. And I live in the quiet I built myself.